Hello everybody, my name is TJ and welcome back to Drawing with TJ. In the previous video, I made the first half of our Avenging League, which consisted of Steel Man, Thunder Woman, Captain Bat, and the Smash. I highly suggest checking the first video out if you haven't already, but I can't tell you what to do, I'm not your mom. In this video, we're going to be rounding out the team with 4 more members. Starting off with the King of Wakanda, Black Panther, and the King of Atlantis, Aquaman. Archala Kerchaka was the son of the exiled Akandan Princess Nyana and a Ghanaian lighthouse keeper named Kwame Kwarteng, who would raise him as a single father after his mother passed away during childbirth. Young Archala had a fascination with the water, which his father would explain was inherited from his mother. The kid would later find that this was no mere intrigue. He would soon discover his abnormal abilities, such as being able to hold his breath underwater indefinitely and the ability to command marine animals. After these discoveries, his father would explain to him that his mother was from the kingdom called Atkanda, an advanced civilization hidden below the waves. Over the next couple of years, Kwame would help Archala hone his skills so he'd be ready for his eventual arrival in Atkanda. Unfortunately, this trip would have to be made sooner than he thought. Word of the kid who could control fish would spread, and by Archala's teen years, they would make their way to the pirate named David Clow. Clow had been aware of the rumors of a civilization sunk into the Gulf of Guinea, but had only believed them to be myth until hearing of this child who could breathe underwater. Clow had also heard that Atconda may have an obscene abundance in the ultra-rare mineral, vibrocalcum, which he wanted to sell for a pretty penny. The Crook eventually tracked down the teen who was fishing with his father and confronted the two with its crew. He demanded they take him to Wakanda, but Kwame refused to comply. Claw put a pistol to the father's head to get him to change his mind. In a panicked state, Archala focused his power into summoning anything that could save his father. A swordfish sprang out of the water, swinging its bill right through Clow's forearm, but not before he could pull the trigger. Using what little time he had left, Kwame pulled a cyan necklace out of his pocket and handed it to his son. With the dock infested with goons, the kid had nowhere left to go but down and fled into the briny depths. After what felt like days of swimming, Archala had finally found it, the lost kingdom of Akanda. This hyper-advanced utopia was even more breathtaking than the stories could convey. He made his way to the gates, where the guards asked him to prove that he was Akandan. Baffled that him making it down there unaided wasn't proof enough, Archala explained that he was the son of an Akandan woman named Nyana, who had left to live on the surface world. Upon hearing this, the guards brought him to the king and explained to Archala that if the claim was true, that would make him the nephew to the current king, Soyor, the Aqua Panther, and rightful heir to the throne. Soyor noticed that Archala was wearing his sister's old necklace, meaning that he was probably telling the truth. Archala would spend the rest of his childhood in Akanda, where he would train to one day take the throne. In addition to further honing his mastery over sea life, he would learn to fight like a true Akandan warrior. When the time came, Archala would defeat his uncle in the combat ritual to become the new Aqua Panther and king of Akanda. Adorned with a vibrocalcum panther suit and equipped with a vibrocalcum trident, King Archala Kuchaka would become one of the finest warriors to ever swim the seven seas. Alright, so obviously for this fusion, I went with these characters because of the similarities between Atlantis and Wakanda. For the most part, it made for a pretty seamless fusion in his backstory, although there are a few things I couldn't really fuse too well. Being African is a huge part of Black Panther's identity, but the name of Aquaman's father isn't like a super common African name. And after doing a little bit of research on Ghanaian names, I found the closest I can get to Tom Curry was Kwame Kwarteng. I wasn't super sure of going with that name at first until I looked up the list of famous people with the name Kwame on Wikipedia, and the literal first guy was wearing a Black Panther shirt, so I just kind of took that as a sign to use that name. And as for the design of the character himself, it was pretty seamless fusion, just like the story. I basically just kind of stuck the top half of Black Panther and the bottom half of Aquaman, but I really feel it works. There's some few other changes though. I went with a bluish cyan color, not only because it's like between, the Aquaman's green pants and, purple glow of vibranium, but also because it invokes, like the ocean. Also gave him little details on his ears and a nose similar to Black Panther's Earth's Mightiest Heroes designs, even though I made the nose a little bit smaller. I also gave him webbed feet to make him a little more animalistic like Black Panther while also making him a little more fish-like like Aquaman. I also really like how I kind of inadvertently gave him counter shading. That was unplanned, but I think it's really cool. And with that, I feel like we're done with our underwater hero and king of Wakanda, Archala Kerchaka, aka the Aqua Panther. And from the depths of the ocean, we're going to make our way up to the vast expanse of outer space with our next fusion, where we combine Hal Jordan as Green Lantern with Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel. Carol Jordan was one of three children of Joe and Marie Jordan, along with her brothers Steve and Joe Jr. Carol had always aspired to be a pilot like her mother, but her father was less than supportive. He believed that women like Marie were the exception, not the rule, and that careers like that were better suited for men. Joe would feel vindicated in his beliefs after Marie died in a crash, traumatizing their daughter who had witnessed the whole ordeal. Between this and her father's misogynistic worldview, it seemed as if the world itself was actively trying to stop Carol from reaching her goals, but she had an iron will. She worked as hard as she could to get the best grades in the family, but despite this, Joseph Jordan Jr. was still waiting to die on his archaic hill and forbid her from going to college. This was the last straw for Carol, and she made the hard decision to turn her back on her family when she turned 18. Finally, without her nagging father in her ear, she would embark on the journey to becoming a pilot by enlisting in the United States Air Force. Once in the Air Force, Carol's willingness to face her fears head on would land her a job testing experimental aircraft. Every time she achieved lift, images of her mother perishing in a ball of fire would flash into the front of her mind, but she would push through. And after a couple of years of situations being normal, things would get all fouled up. While flying a new prototype fighter jet, she noticed another aircraft, but something was off. It looked and behaved like no other aircraft she'd ever seen, so Carol tried flying closer to inspect it. After getting a little too close, she noticed that the craft was badly damaged. She wouldn't have time to contemplate any plans to save this mystery pilot, as a surge of green energy arced its way from the UFO and overloaded her plane's controls, blowing out the engines. Carol managed to eject in time, but a hunk of debris lacerated her parachute, causing her to break her leg on impact. After assessing her situation, Carol noticed a distinct green glint on the desert's horizon. She knew it had to be either the monster from El Centro or the pilot from the strange aircraft. She figured that if it was the pilot, they might have some sort of first aid kit she could use and or also need help, so she limped her way across the desert. After about a day of trekking through the Mojave, she arrived at the crash site. The mystery pilot, a green-clad humanoid with blue skin, introduced himself as Marlon Velt from the planet Hala. He explained that he was on Earth to find her, and gave her his ring. Marlon told Carol that she needed to face what was coming. He then pulled what looked like a green flood lantern out of a compartment and told her to repeat after him. And brightest day, and blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power, green marvel's light. A surge of the same green energy that wrecked her plane permeated her body. A green glow formed around her. Her injuries began to heal, and she began to lift off the ground. She tried using her powers to bring Marlin to safety, but he was teleported away before she could help. With her own injuries healed, and Marlin probably saved, she took the power battery and used the ring to fly back to base. Halfway back, she would be halted by an ambush. A swarm of what appeared to be insectoid gremlins swarmed her. She soon felt overwhelmed as they surrounded her, and wished she still had the weapons from the fighter jet she just crashed. Just then, miraculously, the ring was able to summon green constructs of a minigun and heat-seeking missiles, which he used to wipe out most of the swarm. With the rest of the swarm retreating, she knew that whenever it was time to face whatever Marlin was warning about, Green Marvel would be able to face it without fear. Alright, so obviously the reason for fusing Hal Jordan and Carol Danvers is there are many, many similarities, such as, both being like space-themed characters, both being pilots, and also both being legacy characters on top of that. Art-wise, Hal and Carol's suits were pretty fun to fuse together. I'm not super sure about the logo, but I don't know, I kind of like it. It still has like the 8 points, and you also kind of get the Green Lantern logo in there still. I also tried giving her Captain Marvel's like iconic mohawk, that she sometimes has, but with this perspective, I feel like it might not have been the best choice. I don't know. Just let me know what you think in the comments. I think it's decent enough, but it doesn't really come off as a mohawk now that I look at it. But I don't know. It's not really too distracting either. One thing I do love about this one though is the rendering on the blue parts. That was really fun to do. I think it comes out great. Although I don't know why I made her abs so pronounced, but I don't find it too distracting though. Uh, Especially love the right leg. Also, the little construct she's making and the green glow around her are a little fun to do. And with that, we have our fearless green protector, Green Marvel. Up next, we're going to be combining two more similar-ish characters with Marvel's Wasp and DC's Hawkgirl. Janiera Venthal was from the planet Sectagar, a planet where the dominant inhabitants, Sectagarians, are extremely similar to humans, with a notable exception of thin membranous wings sprouting from their backs. Jan was raised by a single father after her mother sustained a fatal injury at the hands of a mugger. In her adult years, she would join the law enforcement to prevent deaths like this in the future. She would later marry her father's lab assistant, a brilliant scientist by the name of Katenri Holum. One day, Janera was tracking down a thief who escaped to her husband's laboratory. Jan entered the building to find her husband held at gunpoint, where the thief threatened to kill him if she didn't let him go. Katenri managed to knock the gun out of the criminal's hand. Then the criminal threw him at a nearby machine and flew away. The machine started to boot up, and before the couple could process what was happening, an energy field exploded from the contraption, enveloping the whole lab. Jan looked out the window to see that they were no longer on Tektigar. They were teleported to a distant, uncharted planet along with most of the lab, with no way back. After finding civilization, they noticed the inhabitants resembled wingless Sectagarians, and figured they could hide their wings as to not be outed as extraterrestrials. The two would eventually learn the native tongue, learning they were on a planet called Earth, in a place called Illinois, and slowly integrated themselves into human society. The two took the names of Janet and Carter Pym, and even managed to find Earth analogs of their old jobs. As a scientist, Catenary began to study the native fauna, with an obsession with the order of insects Hymenoptera, due to them having similar wings to Thectogarians. He would use his limited supply of Nth metal from his lab from Thectogar to create Nth particles, which could be used to change the size of objects and to become the size of wasps, bees, and the ants he was studying. Gennaro suggested they use their powers and technology to save lives, but Catenary wanted to keep a low profile. Things would change once America entered World War II. The Allies were forming a team of superpowered soldiers called the Invader Society of America, and the couple outed themselves as aliens to join the team. Catenary would go by Hornet Man, and Gennaro would go by Hawk Wasp. Hawk Wasp's combat training made her a natural when it came to fighting the Hydra Brigade, and the power of Hornet Man's size-changing technology only made her and her mates even more devastating. Hornet Man mostly kept to his laboratory, but Hawk Wasp was able to convince him to join her on a field mission to rescue their teammates, Captain Bat and Robbie, after they had both gone MIA on a mission in Egypt to stop the Red Mask. Once in Red Mask space, they would find that the Hydra Brigade had launched a nuclear missile aimed towards Washington, D.C., with Captain Robbie tied to it. Hawk Wasp fought off the Hydra goons while Hornet Man looked for a way to stop the missile. But before he could, the goons were joined by the high-ranking Hydra Brigade officer, Fear Reaper. Jane was able to hold her own against the Reaper for a good minute, but he was able to tip the scales once his scare toxin-laced blade pierced her skin. With her senses impaired, she was hardly able to stop him from getting past Hornet Man and launching a second missile towards Manhattan. The duo went after the second missile to try to disarm it. Hornet Man suggested they shrink small enough so they can fit through a seam in the missile's plating to disarm it from the inside, but shrinking only made the effects of the toxin worse. With the scare toxin affecting their minds more and more, they were unable to see where the seams even were, so their next best option was to shrink so small that they could fit between the atoms. They had never shrunken to that size before, and at a certain point Jan was unable to stop. She started to shrink so far that the laws of time and space became mere suggestions. Eventually she was able to get her vices to work again, and grew back to normal size. She was near the missile's destination of Manhattan, but the missile was gone. Baffled, she made her way to the shore. It turned out that what felt like mere moments while subatomic were decades, and it had been over 70 years since the missile was even launched. Janiera made her way back to her home in Illinois to see if her husband had survived, but Catenary wasn't there. Hearing news of other heroes fighting crime across the world, Janiera would turn to her old profession of fighting crime, heaping the mantle of Hawk Wasp. Okay, now that story was a bit of a doozy to write. If y'all didn't know, Hawkman and Hawkgirl have like 70 like different backstories each that like contradict each other. Also, despite being one of like the founding members of the Avengers and the person to even name the team, Wasp has like barely any backstory. She's just like the daughter of someone Hank Pym knew. Not to say that they're bad characters or anything. I still think they're great characters. And Hot Girl being a part of the Justice Society gave me an excuse to do more story here with the Invader Society of America. So hopefully the story's not too similar to Captain Bats. I thought it was a pretty good callback or whatever. The design itself was pretty fun. If you couldn't tell already, I took some of the design from an actual tarantula hawk wasp, which is the name from that animal is where I got the idea to create this fusion. It was also fun to do the little like Kirby dots and the little red spots to represent the nth particles. And with that, we have our extraterrestrial warrior, Hawk Wasp. And up next, we have the final Avenging League member for now. We're combining everyone's favorite Martian, Martian Manhunter, with a deadly assassin, Black Widow. Natasha Romnova grew up on the planet Mars with her parents Alina and Shashin and her cousin, Yelena Faak. As Martians, they all had powers of shape-shifting, density shifting, and telepathy among other similar powers. Things would go well until a civil war broke out between the green, desert-dwelling Martians and the white, pole-dwelling Martians. Her village would be burnt to the ground, causing the family to flee. During the ensuing chaos, Natasha would get separated from her family and seek shelter in a strange vehicle. Upon hearing soldiers getting close, she panicked and started hitting random buttons in an attempt to pilot the machine. The vehicle launched into the air, higher and higher. As she got further and further from her home, the horizon began to bend, and kept bending until the world became a perfect sphere. And then it began to shrink into a tiny red dot in the distance, barely distinguishable from the stars behind it. The young Martian would drift lonely in space for months, until a little blue dot began to appear bigger and bigger. This must have been Mars's neighboring planet Earth. The ship began to grow closer and closer to the planet at an increasing speed. Upon entering Earth's atmosphere, fire began to surround the craft, reminding Natasha of her burning village, causing her to black out from stress. Natasha woke up in a crater, surrounded by Earthen soldiers. She tried to communicate telepathically to ask for help, but this only freaked them out. They began to fire their weapons at the alien, but she managed to turn herself intangible before the bullets made contact. She attempted to flee into the snowy forest, but was pursued by tanks and helicopters. They fired missiles and mortars at her, but she caught them with her telekinesis and directed them back towards them. This went on for miles until Natasha was cut off by a team wielding flamethrowers, and the fire triggered her post-traumatic stress, causing her to black out. Her powers would be seen as a potential asset for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, and she would be sent to a training facility called the Red Room. She tried to escape, but disobeying her orders would trigger an implant they had placed in her brain to give her visions of fire. In this facility, she would be trained by a man with a metal arm who went by Night Soldier to hone abilities such as hand-to-hand combat and weapon mastery. These skills, combined with her innate abilities of shape-shifting and mind-reading, would lead her to be one of the greatest operatives the KGB have ever seen, with the code name Martian Widow, even long after the Cold War had ended. Eventually, she would be sent on a mission to infiltrate Kent Industries along with her ally, the Red Beast, to kill their defecting former ally, Manchester Purple. Red Beast began to cause chaos outside to draw away attention while Widow snuck into the Kent Industries building disguised as an employee. She easily made her way to finding Manchester in Kent's office and began fighting in a battle of telepathy. They were evenly matched, but as soon as Widow got the upper hand, she'd be interrupted. Steelman lasered an entrance into the room. He aimed his hand towards Widow and demanded that she cease her assault. Afraid of his heat blast, she let Manchester go, then was immediately scolded by her neural implant. This felt fishy to Steelman, so he used his X-ray goggles to assess the situation. In addition to discovering that she was a fellow extraterrestrial, he also found the implant. Tony exited his suit and ran to his desk to grab a small device. Upon activating it, it sent out an electromagnetic pulse, disarming her implant, allowing her to easily remove it via her density shifting. The device had also short-circuited Kent's mechanical heart. Inspired by this act of selflessness, which was one of the only acts of kindness she'd been giving since landing on the Earth, Natasha reached into Tony's brain to learn how to repair this machine, and got his heart working again. Impressed, Tony told Natasha about a group he was forming, of people with skills similar to hers, who were also willing to help others. He asked Martian Widow if she would be willing to join the Avenging League. And roll credits. Fun fact, after I finished drawing Hawk Wasp, I had no idea who I was going to do for the 8th one for a while. Eventually, I was able to decide on Black Widow for the Marvel half, but for a while I couldn't decide for if I wanted to go with Green Arrow, Cyborg, or Martian Manhunter for the DC half, but I eventually went with Martian Manhunter. The idea occurred to me when I realized that a lot of Martian Manhunter's powers would be like really good for a spy, especially mind reading and shape shifting. Also, this story was really fun to write with, Black Widow originally being an Iron Man villain. And then that really gave me the opportunity to like add Steelman back, at the end, kind of loop it all the way back to the beginning of the first video. Also, the design itself was pretty fun, even though it was kind of simple. I was originally going to combine, Black Widow's red hourglass with, Martian Manhunter's iconic red X, but it just didn't end up working out. And with that, we have our extraterrestrial super spy, Martian Widow. And now finally we have a full team for our Avenging League, with Steel Man, Thunder Woman, Captain Bat, The Smash, Aqua Panther, Green Marvel, Hawk Wasp, and the Martian Widow. And it feels so great to finally be done with them all. I'm eventually going to go back and draw them all like I said I would, with one big piece with all dynamic poses eventually, but for now I'm going to put that on the back burner and draw some other characters. And in my next video, I'm going to probably try drawing the characters with dynamic poses from the get-go. Also for this video and the last one, for some reason, I decided to draw all 8 characters first, then drew the story, which in hindsight was a big mistake. So next time I'm going to try to alternate between drawing story. Because as of this recording, I haven't drawn anything in over a month because I've been writing stories. For my next video, I'm going to let y'all decide which team I'm going to draw because I've narrowed it down to 2 teams. X-Men and Doom Patrol fusion I call X-Patrol, or a Legion of Doom and Masters of Evil fusion I call the Masters of Doom. I already have ideas for some characters, but let me know what ideas y'all have down in the comments. Also, in the next video, I'm going to be shouting out the names of the commenters who correctly guessed who the non-drawn characters were supposed to be fusions of. With that, like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, hit the bell if you want to be notified, and I'll see y'all next time when I draw either X-Patrol or Masters of Doom. I'm DJ, this has been Drawing with DJ, and thank y'all for watching. Goodbye.